Imagine a world where your wallet still has money, but your money no longer has freedom, where every payment is watched, every purchase is judged, and access to your own wealth depends on invisible systems you never agreed to. This is not the future, this is already happening. In this video, you'll discover why cash is quietly disappearing, how AI and hidden financial systems are reshaping power, what the elite already know that most people don't, and how this shift will decide who controls money and who is controlled by it. If you care about your freedom, your future, and your financial survival in the next era, don't blink, because once you understand this, you'll never see money the same way again. Imagine waking up one morning, you open your wallet, and cash is still there but no one accepts it. The shop says, digital only. The taxi says, scan the code. The bank says, cash withdrawals are limited. This is not science fiction. This is not a conspiracy. This is already happening. Welcome to the end of cash. This is not about paper money. This is about power, freedom, and survival in the new economy. Cash is anonymous. Cash is private. Right now, while you are watching this, the world is quietly changing its relationship with money, not with announcements or breaking news, but with small updates, new rules, and convenience features that slowly retrain behavior, because the most powerful changes never arrive loudly, they arrive comfortably, and people accept them before they understand them. And that is exactly how cash is ending, not by force but by design, because when a system wants control, it doesn't remove choice all at once. It makes one option easier and the other harder until the harder option disappears on its own. And you can already see this everywhere, from parking machines that refuse notes, to online platforms that never touch physical currency, to banks that ask questions when you withdraw your own money. And each of these moments feels small, harmless, almost logical. Yet together they form a future where money is no longer something you hold, but something you are allowed to use. And this is where most people get confused, because they think money is about numbers. But money has never been about numbers. It has always been about trust and power. And whoever controls the system controls the flow. And in the old world, cash gave individuals a small piece of that power, anonymity, independence, an immediate settlement. But in the new world, digital systems replace trust with verification, and verification with surveillance, and surveillance with control. And this is where artificial intelligence becomes the silent manager of your financial life, because AI does not sleep, it does not forget, and it does not forgive patterns. It watches how you earn, how you spend, how fast you move, what you prioritize, and what you avoid, and over time it builds a financial identity that speaks louder than your words ever could. And once your identity becomes more important than your balance, the rules change completely, because now money is no longer neutral. It becomes conditional, responsive, and programmable. And this is not a theory. It is already being tested in different forms around the world, where digital wallets can be limited, benefits can expire, and spending can be guided toward or proved behavior, and people accept it because it's presented as safety, efficiency, and modernization. But safety always comes at a price, and that price is usually freedom. And the dangerous part is that most people will only notice this shift when they are personally affected, when a transaction fails, when an account is paused, when a limit is reached at the worst possible moment. And by then it feels sudden, unfair, and shocking, even though the signs were always there. And while the public is distracted by headlines, trends, and entertainment, a different group of people is paying close attention. Because the elite do not ask whether cash is ending, they ask what replaces it, who controls it, and how to stay flexible inside it. And flexibility is the real currency of the future, not loyalty to a system, not blind trust in institutions, but the ability to adapt, move, and respond faster than the rules change. And this is why they spread risk, not just across assets, but across systems, jurisdictions, skills, and income streams, because they understand a simple truth that schools never teach: dependence is vulnerability. And the more centralized your financial life becomes, the easier it is to control, pause, or redirect. And this is where mindset separates outcomes, because some people see the end of cash as a threat, while others see it as a signal to learn, to upgrade, to become more valuable than the system itself, because systems can limit money, but they cannot limit competence, creativity, or adaptability. And in a world where AI automates routine tasks and replaces predictable roles, the most valuable people are not the strongest or the richest, but the most mentally flexible, the ones who can learn fast, think critically, and solve problems that machines cannot easily replicate. And money naturally flows toward those people, regardless of the format it takes. And this is why the future will reward individuals who invest in their thinking more than their spending, who build skills instead of lifestyles, and who understand that comfort today often trades away options tomorrow. And every time you choose convenience without understanding the cost, you are making a long-term decision without realizing it. Because the end of cash is not just about how you pay, it is about how you live, how much control you outsource, and how prepared you are to operate in a system that values data more than intention. And as this transition accelerates, the gap between those who understand the rules and those who don't will widen quietly but brutally. Because the system does not punish ignorance, it simply ignores it. And those who fail to adapt will not be attacked. They will be excluded slowly, politely, and efficiently, while those who see the pattern early will move differently, think differently, and position themselves where options still exist. And the most important realization you can have right now is that this future is not waiting for permission. It is already unfolding, and every year you delay understanding it, the cost of entry becomes higher, the rules become tighter, and the margin for error becomes smaller. And this is why awareness is not enough, curiosity is not enough, even intelligence is not enough. What matters is action guided by understanding, because the people who thrive in the next financial era will not be the loudest or the luckiest, but the most prepared, the ones who looked at the end of cash and didn't panic, didn't deny it, didn't blindly accept it, but chose to evolve with eyes open, questions sharp, and decisions intentional, knowing that while forms of money may change, the game of power, value, and control never does. It only changes its interface. And as this interface changes, the most dangerous illusion is thinking that someone will warn you when the old rules stop working, because history shows that transitions don't come with alarms, they come with explanations, soft language, and promises of convenience, and people nod along because resistance feels unnecessary until necessity disappears. And that is why understanding money today requires understanding psychology, because the system does not need force when it has habits, it does not need chains when it has preferences, and it does not need obedience when it has dependency. And dependency grows quietly when people trade responsibility for ease, when they stop asking how things work and only care that they work. And this is how financial power migrates upward without a fight, because every tap, scan, and automated approval feels harmless on its own, yet together they create a world where speed replaces thought and access replaces ownership, and ownership was the last line of defense individuals had, because when you owned cash, settlement was final, but when you access digital money, settlement is conditional, reversible, and reviewable. And this changes human behavior in subtle ways, because when people know they are watched, they self-correct, they hesitate, they conform, and over time they forget that alternatives ever existed, and this is why the future of money cannot be separated from the future of identity, because once money is fully tied to who you are, what you believe, how you behave, and how predictable you are, then financial freedom becomes behavioral compliance, and compliance is rewarded while deviation is quietly discouraged, not with punishment, but with friction, delays, and limits. And friction is the modern weapon because it feels technical, not personal, and people blame themselves instead of the system. And while this is happening, artificial intelligence continues to absorb patterns faster than humans can question them, learning not just what people buy, but when they feel weak, impulsive, stressed, or confident. And this data is more valuable than gold because it predicts behavior, and prediction is the ultimate form of control. Because if a system knows what you will do before you do it, it can shape outcomes without ever touching you, and that is why the future economy will not be divided by rich and poor alone, but by those who are legible to the system and those who are adaptable outside it. Because legible people are easy to manage, easy to score, easy to categorize, while adaptable people are harder to predict, harder to box in, and harder to replace. And this is where education failed most people, because it trained obedience to rules rather than understanding of systems, memorization instead of reasoning, and stability instead of adaptability, preparing people for a world that no longer exists, while the new world rewards those who can learn continuously, unlearn quickly, and move strategically. And this is why the end of cash is also the end of certainty, because certainty was built on fixed rules, predictable jobs, and linear progress. But the coming era is nonlinear, fast-moving, and unforgiving to those who wait for clarity before acting, and the people who succeed will not be those who know everything, but those who stay curious, skeptical, and proactive, who treat money as a tool rather than an identity, and who understand that true security does not come from trusting systems blindly, but from reducing single points of failure in their lives, whether financial, professional, or psychological. And psychology matters more than most realize, because fear makes people cling to familiar structures even when those structures are collapsing, while calm awareness allows people to reposition before panic spreads. And panic always arrives late, after options are gone and narratives harden. And you can see this pattern repeat across history, in currencies, institutions, and empires, where those who adapted early were called paranoid, those who adapted late were called lucky, and those who never adapted were forgotten. And the same pattern is unfolding now, not with tanks or borders, but with software updates, compliance policies, and automated decisions. And this makes it harder to see, because there is no villain to point to, no single enemy to blame, only systems optimizing for efficiency at scale. And scale has no empathy. It only has logic, and logic without humanity can produce outcomes that feel cruel even when they are technically correct. And this is why relying on fairness as a strategy is dangerous, because systems are not designed to be fair. They are designed to function, and functioning systems prioritize stability over individual hardship, which means the individual must prioritize resilience over comfort, and resilience comes from diversity of skills, income, thinking, and options, not from loyalty to one employer, one platform, or one financial gatekeeper. And as the world becomes more digital, paradoxically human qualities become more valuable, such as judgment, creativity, ethical reasoning, and the ability to navigate uncertainty, because machines excel at optimization within known parameters, but humans excel at redefining the parameters themselves. And those who recognize this will invest less in appearances and more in capabilities, less in consumption and more in leverage. And leverage today is not just financial. It is informational, social, and intellectual, because knowing how systems work gives you an advantage even before you have resources. And this is why awareness itself is a form of wealth, because it allows you to see moves before they are obvious, to ask better questions, And to avoid traps disguised as progress, and as cash fades from daily life, the temptation will be to mourn what is lost instead of preparing for what replaces it. But nostalgia is not a strategy, and resistance without understanding only accelerates exclusion, while blind acceptance leads to dependency, and the narrow path forward is conscious participation, where you engage with new systems without surrendering your agency, where you use technology without letting it define your worth, and where you remember that money has always been a mirror of human values, reflecting what societies prioritize and what they are willing to trade away. And the coming years will reveal those priorities clearly, because every policy, platform, and protocol will answer the same silent question about what matters more: efficiency or freedom, control or trust, and individuals will answer their own version of that question through their choices, habits, and preparation, often without realizing the long-term consequences until years later when the world feels different but no single moment explains why. And that is the nature of gradual transformation. It reshapes reality while people are busy living inside it, and those who pause long enough to observe, think, and act intentionally gain an advantage that compounds quietly, not overnight, but steadily, as the gap widens between those who react to change and those who anticipate it, and this gap will define financial outcomes, social mobility, and personal autonomy in ways that are only beginning to surface. And as this gap continues to widen, another quiet shift takes place that few people notice at first, which is the emotional relationship people develop with money when it becomes invisible. Because when money is physical, you feel it leaving your hand, but when money is digital, spending becomes abstract, frictionless, and psychologically painless, and this changes behavior at scale, leading people to spend more, save less, and rely increasingly on systems to manage impulses they no longer consciously control. And when systems manage impulses, they also shape outcomes, because whoever designs the rules of ease and difficulty designs behavior itself. And this is why future financial power will belong less to those who have money and more to those who design how money moves, because influence over flow is more powerful than ownership of stock. And this is already visible in how platforms decide which transactions are instant, which are delayed, which are flagged, and which quietly disappear into review processes that have no human face. And the absence of a human face is important because people argue with people, but they submit to systems, assuming neutrality where none truly exists, and this assumption allows complexity to shield responsibility. Because when something goes wrong, there is no one to confront, only a policy, a process, or an automated decision, and over time this trains people to lower expectations, accept limitations, and internalize blame, which further stabilizes control, and stability is the highest value of any large system, even when that stability comes at the cost of individual growth. And this is why those who want to remain free must understand not just finance, but incentives, because incentives reveal truth more reliably than words. And the incentive of digital money systems is not personal freedom, but predictability, compliance, and risk reduction at scale. And while these goals make sense from an institutional perspective, they often conflict with human complexity, creativity, and nonlinearity, which cannot be easily scored or predicted. And this is where friction appears for individuals who do not fit neat profiles, because systems prefer averages, not outliers, and progress has always come from outliers, from those who moved differently, thought differently, and refused to be fully legible. And as the future becomes more data-driven, the tension between individuality and optimization will intensify, because optimization smooths edges while individuality creates them, and edges are where innovation lives, but also where risk is perceived, and perceived risk is what systems seek to minimize. And this creates a paradox where the very traits that drive advancement are discouraged by the structures meant to manage society. And navigating this paradox requires awareness and strategic thinking rather than rebellion or compliance alone, because both extremes reduce options, and options are the true measure of wealth in uncertain times, not balances or titles, but the ability to choose among multiple paths when conditions change, and conditions will change faster than ever as technology accelerates feedback loops, compresses timelines, and amplifies second-order effects that few anticipate. And when change accelerates, mistakes become more expensive and recovery windows shrink, which means preparation must happen earlier and more intentionally. And this preparation is less about hoarding resources and more about building internal resilience, adaptability, and clarity of thinking, because external resources can be frozen, taxed, devalued, or restricted, but internal capabilities compound quietly and travel with you across systems, borders, and formats. And this is why the most dangerous mindset in the coming era is complacency disguised as trust, the belief that because something has always worked, it always will, because history is a record of systems that worked until they didn't, often failing not from collapse, but from evolution that left unprepared people behind. And those people rarely saw it as failure at first, only as inconvenience, then limitation, then exclusion, and by the time the pattern became clear, adaptation was costly or impossible. And this gradual narrowing of options is far more effective than sudden shock, because it avoids resistance, and resistance requires awareness, and awareness requires attention, which is the scarcest resource of all, because attention is constantly fragmented by noise, urgency, and distraction, leaving little space for long-term thinking, and long-term thinking is precisely what this transition demands, because the end of cash is not a single event, but a multi-year process that reshapes habits, expectations, and norms are powerful because they define what feels normal, acceptable, and inevitable. And once something feels inevitable, people stop questioning it, and unquestioned systems gain momentum regardless of outcomes. And this is why questioning is not negativity, but responsibility, because questioning reveals assumptions, and assumptions drive decisions even when they are invisible. And invisible decisions shape lives more than conscious ones. And as money becomes increasingly integrated with identity, reputation, and data, the consequences of assumptions multiply, because a single misclassification or algorithmic judgment can ripple across access to credit, opportunities, and mobility, creating feedback loops that reinforce initial labels. And breaking out of such loops becomes harder when everything is connected, and connectivity is a double-edged sword, because it increases efficiency but reduces isolation. And isolation once allowed people to experiment, fail privately, and recover without permanent records. But permanent records change behavior, making people risk-averse, cautious, and dependent on approval. And approval becomes a currency of its own, traded for access, visibility, and opportunity. And when approval becomes currency, authenticity declines, because people optimize for what is rewarded rather than what is true. And this has economic consequences, because innovation requires truth, experimentation, and tolerance for failure, and systems that punish deviation too efficiently eventually stagnate, even if they appear stable in the short term. And individuals caught inside such systems must learn to balance participation with independence, engagement with discretion, and ambition with awareness, because the future will not belong exclusively to rebels or conformists, but to those who understand the game well enough to play it without being consumed by it. And this understanding is not taught formally, it is learned through observation, pattern recognition, and reflection, through noticing how incentives shape outcomes and how narratives justify transitions, and narratives matter because they provide meaning, and people accept change more easily when it is framed as progress, safety, or inevitability, even when trade-offs are hidden, and recognizing narratives allows individuals to separate signal from story, reality from justification. And this separation is critical in a time when information abundance creates confusion rather than clarity, and clarity is power, because clear thinkers make better decisions under uncertainty. And uncertainty will define the coming years as economic, technological, and social shifts intersect in unpredictable ways, and in such an environment, rigid plans fail while flexible strategies survive. And flexibility comes from optionality, learning capacity, and emotional regulation, not from rigid beliefs or single paths. And emotional regulation is particularly important because fear and excitement are easily manipulated at scale, driving people toward impulsive decisions that benefit systems more than individuals. And recognizing emotional triggers allows people to pause, think, and choose intentionally rather than reactively. And intentional choice is the foundation of autonomy, which is the deeper issue beneath the end of cash. Because money is merely a tool, but autonomy is the outcome people truly care about, the ability to shape one's life according to values rather than constraints imposed without consent. And as tools change, autonomy must be defended through understanding rather than nostalgia, because longing for the past does not prepare one for the future, and the future does not wait for consensus. It moves forward driven by incentives, efficiency, and innovation, whether individuals are ready or not. And readiness is not about predicting every outcome, but about building the capacity to respond when outcomes diverge from expectations. And those who cultivate this capacity will find that even as systems grow more complex, their personal sense of agency can remain intact, not because they control everything, but because they understand enough to navigate intelligently, adapt quickly, and avoid unnecessary dependence. And this quiet competence will become increasingly valuable as noise increases and certainty decreases, allowing those who possess it to move through changing financial landscapes with confidence rather than fear, curiosity rather than denial, and strategy rather than hope. The end of cash is not the end of opportunity, but it is the end of ignorance. Because from this point forward, those who do not understand how money, systems, and power truly work will slowly lose control without ever seeing a clear moment where it happened. While those who choose awareness over comfort and preparation over denial will rise quietly above the noise, not by fighting the future, but by mastering it. This is a time that demands sharper thinking, stronger skills, and a deeper sense of personal responsibility, because no system will protect you better than your own ability to adapt, learn, and move intelligently. And while money may become digital, programmable, and conditional, your mindset does not have to be. So remember this clearly and act on it now. The future will not reward those who wait, complain, or blindly trust. It will reward those who understand the game early, position themselves wisely, and become so valuable that no system can afford to ignore them. Cash is freedom.